A very warm welcome to the Focus Bee Show. I have the privilege today to be here with Bunmi Durowoju. Bunmi is a senior business developer at Microsoft. She was included by the Financial Times as one of the top UK 100 most influential tech leaders. And Bunmi is also an advocate for technology for good. Thank you so much for being on the show today, Bunmi.
Thank you for inviting me. I am yet another one of your your podcast newbies, but hopefully it'll be one of many. I've been very excited to join you today.
It's fantastic to have you here. I know that off air we were speaking a bit about the concept of Ikigai, which comes from Japan. Could you tell us a bit more about this concept and why it's important for you?
Yeah, sure. And I love the concept of Ikigai. And you know what? I'm still delving into it. I'm still learning about it. But when it first, it was a friend of mine who knows what the Bunmi energy is like, as I speak about myself in third person, and the type of things and the number of things that I do. And often, you get to the question, how are you doing it? Why are you doing it? How is any of this making sense? And when I came across Ikigai, and when it was referred to me as like, have a look at this, it was just perfect. And just being able to consider the different parts of life and how they overlap into these fantastic kind of concentric circles, and how it then makes sense in terms of how you're thinking about your values, thinking about where you're putting your time. And and I love this kind of aim for like the perfect place in the middle, right, where what your profession is, what the I've got them written down here, so I need to get them right. Your profession, your mission, your vocation, and your passions, right? If you can get all of those four to join in the middle in some of the things that you do, it's the perfect place. And so that's always my aim. You know what, sometimes I get half of the overlap, sometimes I'm like way out of the diagram completely and stuff, but it's lovely aim. And when you do get to a point where you're like, oh, I'm doing something that makes sense in all of those fields, you just feel such a great calm. So yeah, everybody go check it out.
It's amazing. It sounds to me a bit like living in your zone of genius. I feel your zone of genius covers these areas. So do you feel that what you're doing in terms of your profession is also your vocation and your zone of genius, and it's all tied together?
You know what, I constantly aspire for that to happen. Some parts of it are out of my control, and some parts of it you're just like, oh yeah, I think we're very close, right? And I'm lucky because I work for a company that does at the moment have a lot of values and a culture that I aspire to, and a culture that I am happy to stand by. Not always been the case, and not necessarily people's cases in other jobs they're doing. My passions, absolutely. And it's interesting, right? The passion is sometimes what is from within, but sometimes it's about your environment, right? Like if my profession allows me to build certain elements of my passion and be able to grow in a certain way, there's this kind of like two-way street, right? And then, yeah, what I'm good at, okay? If it was a case of like sit in the corner, be quiet, don't speak, we'd have a problem here. But in terms of inspiring, in terms of being energetic, in terms of like getting people to think in a different way, and I suppose empowering, enabling to, yes, I could do that in my job. It's something I'm passionate about. It's probably something I'm good at because I don't think about it much. It just happens, right? And then the mission, yeah, the mission to make everybody feel okay, to have a moment in time when they're happy. So yes, I feel like I've in a good space for that, and it has taken work. Some of it intentional, so I think that's the point. Some of it lucky, and some of it, still, it's a moving target, and you keep an eye on it.
I love this intercross between the intentional and lucky and moving towards it. And also loved what you shared about the values, how for some people working in a corporate environment can be a struggle because they don't feel aligned with the values. But you have this alignment with the values at Microsoft, which means that it sort of ticks all the boxes and helps you to fit in your Ikigai zone. Can you tell
Exactly.
us a bit about the struggle part or the work towards it. So you said some of it was luck, but some of it was intentional. Can you
Yes.
explain a bit more about this?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll touch a little bit upon, there was I've been at Microsoft for a while, and then there was a point where I wasn't as vocal about things that I am now. Things about, what we're doing from an equity and equality perspective and what have you. And I wasn't as vocal, which meant I was not being my true self. But that is because I wasn't sure the company was where I was at. It's as simple as that, right? And at that point, actually, yeah, I was thinking about having to make certain decisions. But then, as serendipity has it, as time has it, as culture happened, there was this moment in the company where it was like, oh, I think we need to think about this stuff differently. I think we need to have some dialogue. And it was all the buttons that needed to be pressed. It was all the kind of like the code in the safe that were all being pressed for the safe to be open, and for me to feel safe to just say, oh, actually, great, you have given me a forum and a platform to speak my truth, to be my authentic self. It's all still going to be a journey, all right, but thank you for very expressly giving me that platform to move on. Without that platform, I don't think I would have put my head above the parapet to be, open and share my stories and empower as I do. So that's an interesting piece too. And then really, like your vocation, your passions, your missions, they do change. They do change, right? There will always be like a core piece about you as a human being, right? They do change, and then sometimes that change is a bit disconcerting. You're just like, oh, I wasn't thinking about that like that last time, and now I'm thinking about that. And you've got to take yourself through that journey of change, right? And that can sometimes be a little bit uncomfortable. And then there's sometimes, and this is where the struggle can be, where you're really pushing against like forces, and it's not, like you are talking about something that everybody's finding really difficult to get their head around, and you've got to really be sort of strong and courageous and brave in talking about your passions, your missions, even doing your job, even in fulfilling your vocation. So it's the ebb and flow of life.
Like a constant exploration, a constant
Yes.
journey of re-exploring and re-going through it.
Yes. And I think once you decide, and everybody says that it's the journey, it's not the destination, and and I shouldn't say la 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 la, like all blah blah blah, but everybody says it. But you've really, there's about saying it, and then there's like settling really nicely into it. And the way that I kind of see that ebb and flow in the journey is that I see it as like, like the graphs that you have, or the doop, doop, doop. I think you understand, the graphs. It's like, it's as long as it keeps going, right? We're in good shape. Sometimes it's going to, like have really huge peaks, and sometimes you've got a nice little even. And to be honest, if it's flatline, you're probably in trouble. Okay. But as long as you're sort of like doing this sort of journey and this flow of up and down, as far as I'm concerned, it's that whole journey that I love, and it's all about, all right, the ups and downs of it.
Amazing. I love this. I know exactly what you're saying in terms of knowing that it's about the journey and actually feeling it, because I read it, heard it, knew it a million times until one day it clicked, until one day I realized that I was obsessing about goals and not taking time to appreciate where I was.
Exactly. And a really kind of like a really good example of, I always laugh, a real good example of that, right, is like your kind of like exercise routines, right? All right, so everybody's going, yeah, out there, right? Like the exercise routines, like, oh yeah, I was smashing it for 3 weeks, then I ate cake for 2. Then I was smashing it for 2 weeks, then I slept for 3. And then I went running again, then I slept for 4, and I did nothing. And then there was a point where I was just like doing all of this stuff, and, being busy, being active. I love being active and all the rest of it, but sometimes it couldn't happen. And then one year, I literally deliberately looked back to the year that had just gone past, and literally did a mental review of how active I had been through that year, right? And when I looked at it and I thought, actually, my graph of how active, you know, from skiing to running to do a little like mini triathlon that like nearly finished me and stopped me from doing exercise for 3 weeks afterwards, and you know, like getting on the bike, I just thought, oh, I've done a pile of stuff, right? Of course, consistency is perfect, and hence why I'm not an Olympic champion, right? However, I looked back and I thought, I've actually done well. It's been ups and downs, and you know, and I've had to reconfigure and all the rest of it. But in the greater scheme of things, I've been active across the year. Boom, great. And that's the way. That's an example of what I'm trying to say.
That's amazing. It's looking at the bigger picture instead of getting obsessed about the consistency of the daily things.
Yeah, that's what causes the stress.
Yes, exactly. So it sounds to me that from that perspective, you were leading yourself very well and sort of rewarding yourself already for the progress that you've done. I know that one of the areas of self-leadership can be effectiveness. So here we're looking at sort of consistency of exercise routine, but in general, what do you feel are your struggles in terms of being effective?
Oh, wow, yeah. And as you know, I thought of that. I thought, let me, you know, I thought of it. I wanted to be kind to myself, but I wanted to be honest about myself. And I also didn't want to like dig up like a bunch of stuff that I feel that I had sorted out. But if I said to you that I was going to sort of name the three really, and it was procrastination, which I feel I no longer want to use in my vocabulary because it just makes me get all hot and sweaty. Finishing, and so finishing things, and sleep. And I've gone through a journey of, like I said, either not even calling them by their name and just saying it's part of it's something that I am dealing with, have dealt with. I've read every book on procrastination. I've read everything, and then now I've realized, man, this thing is not procrastination. This is like I was not ready to do that thing. I was not ready. Or actually, at the end of it, it probably didn't need to be done anyway, right? Which is interesting, right? We who've had the procrastination journey, many of us, and it's in all the books, was trying to do too much anyway, right? Or we were trying to do it, not do it at the right time, or we were trying to do something that wasn't about us. And when you now start looking at like the narrative like of essentialism, right? Do the one thing that's going to make you all right. I had this thing down pat ages ago. I just didn't realize it. For me, it was just like accidentally doing the one thing that really mattered, and then like having a complete panic attack about all the stuff that I wasn't getting to, right? So I just thought, you know what, that's fine. Finishing, I love the idea of finishing. Again, I've now decided to stop saying it is my problem, because I've worked really hard to either delegate and have things done, or finishing, just doing it, but only taking on, you know, something I can see there's a beginning, there's a middle, I know what the end is, driving to that end, really being intentional and not being panicked, and not sending myself off course because I'm beating myself all up already that I don't finish things, right? So a lot of this you're hearing about me, I'm just like reconfiguring the narrative about a bunch of stuff, because I feel it's the labels and the narrative and all the rest of it that press the brakes straight away. It presses the brakes. If I just go, oh, I'm going to start this thing, but I know what I'm like, I'm going to finish it, then what's going to happen? Before I even started it, right? Before I even started it. So I'm not doing that. Then sleep. I'm not a sleeper. but it's only because I think there's one thing I joke about people. I say, if I sleep, can you imagine all the things I could have been doing while I'm sleeping? But also I've just got lots of energy, and you know, my mind is always going and stuff. I think I do need to sleep more, but again, it's been very open to who I am. Like I have loads and loads and loads of sleep. I'm more like a short sleep that person, and you know, there's a whole lot of studies around that, right? I think we're called something, I can't remember what it's called, but I do short slots and what have you. Some of that came about from being a mother of four, some of that came about by working on much, different time zones, right? I spent a lot of my life on the US time zone in the UK. And so your body just gets used to that. And then also I think in my sleep, I problem solve in my sleep. I go to bed, I will go to bed on a thought and then kind of like have the aha moment. I've been known to have a piece of paper and write in my sleep and what have you. But all of these are kind of like, some of it's my superpowers, and but the management, so I absolutely acknowledge it requires management. Like a sane person wouldn't really be able to cope with that. So, the writing in my sleep, that's a coping mechanism. Going to bed with like affirmations sometimes, and I know I've just got to come down, I'll go to bed with affirmations and some toes. I make sure I sleep then. Allowing myself to have a short rest in the day, I will do that, not a problem. And so I do put the coping mechanisms around that as well. So yeah, so my 3 things. I'm sure there's more, but don't talk to my friends or my husband or my children.
I feel already that you've really looked in depth, at least at these 3, and it's really interesting how you relabeled the procrastination one and the finishing task, and how just the fact of relabeling them helps you to manage it. Because if you fix on it, this is my problem, then as you said, you would sometimes not start a project because you'd be afraid that you wouldn't finish it.
Correct.
So that's really interesting. And in terms of the sleep, again, it's about that self-awareness and knowing what works for you, what doesn't, and then allowing yourself to have those breaks during the day, maybe to sleep or to have that pen and paper by your bed. So it's all about, in general, I feel, about self-awareness and coping mechanism.
Yes, completely. And if you think about it, if you kind of pick up what I sort of said about the finishing, right, when it was just such a, don't get me wrong, of course I've got to finish my deals at work. Of course I've got to finish this podcast. Of course I've got to try and finish a meal and all the rest of it. So, let's be reasonable here, everybody. But, when we talk about what I said before about it's all about that journey, it makes the finishing actually less important, right? So if I did pick up and I started and I would, whatever the project is, I started it. I did that thinking through. I did that learning. I did that research. I did whatever. I went and I had a few conversations with someone. I'm like, oh, okay. I see that's a new thing that I haven't learned. And then I start writing it down, and I'm kind of starting to write it down. And the old Bunmi comes back and is like, this is way too much writing. Oh, I'm not going to get to it. What have you? And we kind of get like a slope of like, oops, it happened there. But there was all this great stuff that took me to the point that has given me an experience, given me a learning, maybe given me access to someone I wouldn't normally have spoken to, made me do some research around a topic that I would not normally have done. Admittedly, did I write the final thing? Meh, don't know. Did I get to a point of conclusion? Probably not, maybe so. But what happened? What happened to that point? Great stuff. So kind of tying that together.
I feel from what you're saying that it's really about deciding what things are worth finishing, because there are things you have to finish for work, your meal, this podcast, but there are others that's sort of optional. And if you feel you've learned a lot along the way and you've enjoyed that, but the actual finishing of it doesn't mean that much, then you're giving yourself that permission to move on.
You've got it. Allow yourself. Exactly. And it's all about being nice to yourself. Otherwise you do spend we spend a lot of our lives beating ourselves up, right? We do.
It's interesting. It's almost the exact opposite of sort of people that are more on the perfectionist tendency. They have to cross and do every I and every tick, and they need a bit of your energy, Bunmi. They need a bit of, this was fun, but maybe I have too much on my plate. Maybe this isn't the right project for me. Maybe I don't actually need to finish this one for once, because there are people that are like us, because I'm like you, a start to end planner that like starting more than finishing. But there are people who love to finish and they feel the need to finish every single thing. So they need the opposite. We need to find a sort of compromise and balance here.
We do. But so this is the other piece to add to that, right? Those that need to finish and get phenomenal satisfaction and calm and relief and stand up straight, their head held high because they finished, knock yourself out. If, however, that finishing has drained you, stressed you out, made you feel less than you should, taken you on a journey that was, you know, may have alienated you from people, alienated you from a family. You've carried yourself in a way because you were just so single-minded in getting the thing. We need to talk. Right? So it's about that, because like you said, and what would we do, right? In the best thing, you and I would partner with the finisher, who's just like swagger with the finish. We'd have swagger with the start, and it would just be like the dream team, right? But the person who's like at the end and just like falling about the place, we'd be like, okay, this whole thing isn't going to work because we've got different energies here, right?
Yeah, I love this. It's more about, again, the journey and how you're feeling about it. And if you get a huge kick and you're enjoying it and you love the finishing, awesome. But like you said, if it's draining you or taking away your energy, depleting you, and you're just finishing to be like a good student, because I think it's a good student syndrome. It's like wanting to tick it all off and get the good grades, but in the real world, there's no such thing as this. So we have to learn to readapt and not stay in this sort of frame of mind.
Yes.
Anyway, I love this topic. And you also talked a bit right now about stress and how sometimes, as we discussed a bit off air, we don't realize that we're stressed. And sometimes, what can we do in those moments to notice this stress that's sort of hidden from our awareness?
Yeah, exactly. And it's so funny. So stress is another word. Let's start from the beginning. Another word that I try not to use too much in my vocabulary. But we'll talk about it, and you know, and I did. But then it's one of those ones that when it's in the front of you, you need to deal with it, right? So I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm just saying that I don't want to go through my whole life at least 16 times a day telling people I'm stressed, or be around people who are stressed constantly as well, because it's a real energy, right? It's a difficult energy. So the way that, but that is not to say that I have not been in stressful situations, and I could tomorrow. This morning was an interesting morning, but you know, I did all the things that I do when it comes to that. So that's my overall view about a word. And then my next point of attention is my body. And obviously everybody knows, you know, like why you have stress and what's happening, and, you know, your fight and flight and all of that stuff. So to be honest with you, what I just love about just being a human being is a lot of things just really boils down to your physiology, biology, and what have you. We try and add like intelligence and theories and stuff on top of things that were just there. It's there for you to know, right? You're stressed because blah, you're not feeling good because of A, you're not feeling good is presenting itself in your body physically, and so your solutions are A, B, and C. I am that clear about it. I'm just that clear about it. So for me, I do try, and I do tell everybody to try just to know your body, know yourself. I've got two daughters. I've got a teen, you know, I've got someone who's 22 now. I've got a little 8-year-old, and I just say, you know, my job as a mother is to say, know your body, know everything. You know, when you're getting a flare up, when are you feeling hot, when are you feeling tired, when is your heart pumping, when are you feeling sad? Look around. Like I've taught my children from very early, and my sons as well, to be honest with you, to attach in physical indicators to what has happened and what's going on. So for me, very early on, I realized when I was going through stuff, so, you know, exams, stuff like that and all the rest of it, my stomach would be where it happens. And I think that's for a lot of people, right? You know, your stomach, your digestive, I'd get kind of acidy stuff, acid reflux, all this stuff. And, you know, you'd run around and just go, oh, my stomach again, oh, da, 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 da. But actually, often linked to a point of high intensity. People have it with migraines, right? People have it with flushes, they have it with all sorts of things. Know that, don't ignore it. Absolutely don't ignore it, which is a thing that we do tend to do. We'll move past it, we'll go to the doctors, we'll do all sorts of things. That is actually ignoring it. And that's ignoring the source, and it's not going to help you. So you need to work out like, oh, that's my trigger. That's the bit, that's where it takes me. And then you start preempting it. right? You start preempting it. I know that with my stomach, I do have to be careful with some of the things. I'm not overly careful, she says. There's lots of ice cream and cake going down yesterday, right? But it's not that, but I do know what works and what doesn't. I do know if I'm not at a wrong time, what happens. I do know what I need to do to be really lovely stomach wise. And now I don't allow myself to get to a point where I'm actually going to be acidy and what have you. So there's that. From a upset perspective, if I'm getting upset, or you know what I mean, like from a temper perspective, I'll be honest, I can literally feel myself getting hot. I can it's talked about all the time, but I can literally feel the heat rising, and I'm just like, okay, and then you'd have to just breathe it through, or move away from the situation and what have you. But it's physical indicators, very physical indication, which will often tell you before it's gone bad. It's often telling you before things have gone really bad. So that for me is I think the key to managing your stress, over and above some of the theoretical things that we try to do, which help as well. But yeah.
I love this. Going back to the body and how we feel and the physiological perceptions of stress is so helpful. And while you were saying the different examples with your stomach and the head, I'm just reminded of my throat. And it's only maybe been a year or two that I've started to, and I feel at the microscopic level of anxiety or stress, I feel it tighten.
Yes.
And so I know as soon as something is slightly not aligned, or I'm slightly, I feel it immediately. And so when you have this sort of thing and this ability and you notice it, it's a fantastic way not to get too stressed.
Beautiful. Exactly. I mean, that's what I'm saying, that we've been given everything. We've been given everything. It's just for us to get it. You're right. The throat is another huge one, massive, huge one. You know what I mean? Just to get an experience. I'm not, medical or anything like that, but I just know you see it in people, right? The skin, another one as well, which is an obvious one that we all know about, right? Your throat, your skin, but even like people's breathing, right? Even like, in this time of COVID and what have you, like how your lungs are expanding, and then in stress, how, you're just going to get constricted. Childbirth, labor, do you know what I mean? It's all kind of there. So it's a real, when people go, oh, what are you doing? The superpower and all the rest, it's like, we've actually all got that power. It just depends on whether you're prepared to tap into it.
Amazing. It's so true. And it's so wonderful. And tapping into all these different parts of the body and noticing them, and then seeing them as actually what is going on. Like you said, what are the triggers? So you can not go to the doctors to solve it on a superficial level, but solve it at the core. So it's so important. Bunmi, we're already like at the half an hour. I don't know how this has happened.
I told you half an hour is never going to work, but it's okay.
It has just flown by. Thank you so much for all your insights. It's been fascinating. There's been at least 3 huge takeaways in terms of Ikigai, in terms of how we deal with our stress, and also what you were saying with the different effectiveness. So I know that it's been half an hour packed of value for the listeners. So thank you so much for being on the show.
You are welcome, and anytime. You've broken me in now, so anytime. We can talk about the other sections.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.